There is a reason why the image of the mother recurs so powerfully in dreams, in art, in myths, and in the quiet spaces of the soul. The mother is not just the one who gave us life biologically. She is the first mirror in which we glimpse our worth, the first voice that teaches us the rhythm of belonging or abandonment. But deeper still, the mother becomes an archetype, a symbolic structure within the unconscious mind that defines the way we understand nurture, safety, and identity. To encounter the mother is to face the foundation of our emotional architecture. And this is no light matter, for what is unconscious rules us more powerfully than what we know. In many lives, the figure of the mother becomes both a source of love and a source of silent wounding. The problem is not merely what she did or did not do. It is the way her presence or absence shaped the internal landscape. A mother does not need to be cruel for the child to carry wounds. Even the most loving mother, flawed and human as she is, can unintentionally plant seeds of inadequacy, of fear, of misplaced loyalty, of spiritual confusion. The mother, being the first godlike figure to the infant, leaves an imprint that continues to echo throughout adulthood, long after we've left her house. And because her image is internalized, we often no longer know whether we are dealing with the real woman or the psychological mother we constructed in our inner world. This is why many find themselves reacting irrationally in relationships, regressing under stress, or yearning for approval from people who cannot give it. They are not living in the present. They are still speaking to their mothers in every conversation. When they are rejected by a friend, they are reliving the moments they felt unseen as a child. When they sabotage love, they are acting out unspoken anger toward a mother who did not protect or attune. When they idolize a romantic partner, they may be unconsciously projecting the sacred image of the perfect mother who could finally soothe the ache within. And so the cycle continues, not because the wound is fresh, but because the mother has never truly been met within. We cannot heal what we will not face, and we will not face what we do not understand. Many people avoid this deep work because they fear it is dishonoring to their parents. But the truth is that the soul cannot grow while it is protecting the image of perfection. Healing requires truth, and truth requires courage. In the Bible, we are said to honor our father and mother, but this is not a command to deny our pain or suppress the reality of our formation. True honor is not the silence of repression, but the strength of honest engagement. Until we face the mother, not just the woman who raised us, but the deeper psychological construct, we remain children, no matter our age. The image of the mother becomes a lens through which we view not only ourselves but also God. If the mother was cold, we may feel that God is distant. If she was unpredictable, we may fear that love is unstable. If she was overbearing, we may view authority as suffocating. This is why the spiritual life is often entangled with the maternal imprint. It is no small thing that in Scripture, God speaks to his people as a mother comforts her child. He presents himself not only in fatherly terms, but with maternal tenderness, saying, "Can a mother forget her nursing child?" There is a reason for this language. It speaks to the deepest longing of the heart to be seen, known, and nurtured at the root. But that longing often remains buried under layers of defense. For some, the mother was physically present, but emotionally absent. For others, she was emotionally entangled, blurring the line between herself and her child. For still others, she was idealized, placed on a pedestal so high that any criticisms like betrayal. These dynamics may seem ordinary, even culturally reinforced, but they can deeply distort the soul's capacity to relate to the world. When the mother is not seen as a human being, but as a force either to be blamed or worshipped, healing is arrested. We must see her as she was, and as she wasn't. We must allow ourselves to feel the grief of what was lacking and the gratitude for what was given without collapsing into bitterness or denial. The deeper work is to allow the image of the mother to transform. not to erase it, but to see it in the full light of awareness, out of fear, to recognize where we are still seeking her in others, where we are still trying to prove our worth to her, or waiting for her to say the words she never said. This is where the unconscious holds us in its grip, not in the facts of the past, but in the symbolic meanings we attach to those facts. To break free, we must go inward, into the hidden corridors of memory, dream, and longing. We must trace the patterns of our reactions, the shape of our fears, the structure of our need. And in those inner spaces, we often find the mother, not as a woman of flesh and blood, but as a ghostly figure haunting our self-image. In the Bible we are said that the truth shall make you free, but freedom does not come without a reckoning. The reckoning is not only with the mother herself, but with the version of ourselves we became in response to her. Did we become caretakers, always tending to others to earn love? Did we become rebels, rejecting all authority to escape her grip? Did we become perfectionists, striving endlessly to be the child she could admire? These patterns are not random. They are rooted in the original relationship, the primal bond. And unless brought to light, they continue to operate in every corner of our lives. We do not escape our mothers by running from them, nor by clinging to them. We heal only by facing the truth of what they meant to us and what they still represent within us. This is not a betrayal. It is a liberation. In the Bible we are said that we must leave father and mother to be joined to another. And while that verse speaks of marriage, it also speaks of spiritual maturity, to truly enter into union with others, with God, with ourselves. We must first leave behind the inherited patterns that no longer serve. We must look the mother image in the face and say, "You shaped me, but you do not define me." Only then does the soul begin to rise into its own form. There is a kind of pain that lingers not in the body or even the conscious mind, but in the deeper chambers of the soul where memory merges with identity. It is the pain of unfinished patterns, of unconscious loyalties, of emotions that cannot speak their names. And at the core of much of this unspoken grief is the internalized image of the mother, a presence carried not in photographs or stories, but in the invisible blueprint of the self, fear. Most people believe they are reacting to the world around them, but they are often reacting to the world within them. And within that world lives the mother, not just as a memory, but as a psychic construct, an emotional compass, a formative voice whispering beneath every thought. Until this image is faced, questioned, and integrated, emotional healing remains incomplete. No matter how much time passes or how many external changes occur, children grow with eyes wide open and hearts undefended, absorbing not only words and actions, but atmospheres and silences. The mother becomes the first mirror in which they see themselves, and from that mirror, they draw their earliest conclusions about love, safety, and self-worth. If the mirror is cracked, through neglect, over-control, criticism, inconsistency, or simply emotional absence, the reflection is distorted, and the child cannot know who they are apart from the distortion. This distorted reflection becomes internalized as a kind of inner mother, a figure who continues to live inside the psyche long after childhood has ended. This inner figure is not bound to the facts of the mother's behavior, but to the meanings the child assigned to those behaviors. These meanings become scripts, expectations, and patterns that operate beneath conscious awareness. It is this internalized mother, crafted in the shadows of early experience, that we must confront if we are to heal. For many, the pain does not come from what the mother did, but from what she never said, never noticed, never offered. The wound is in the silence, in the yearning that went unmet. And so we carry that yearning into adulthood, searching for someone or something to finally fulfill what was left undone. But nothing satisfies. Partner is nurturing enough. No friendship is loyal enough. No success is validating enough. Because we are not relating to the present. We are still relating to the unmet need, the hungry child within. That child does not want success. That child wants to be seen, held, and known. And until we recognize the mother we carry inside, we will misinterpret the world around us, mistaking every disappointment for betrayal, every absence for rejection. In the Bible we are said that the heart is deceitful above all things, and this is no more true than in the realm of emotional memory. We deceive ourselves into thinking the past is behind us simply because it is no longer visible. But the past lives in us through reflexes and assumptions. When someone withdraws, we panic, not because of them, but because our inner mother withdrew her love. When someone gets close, we sabotage, not because we don't want love, but because we fear being engulfed by someone who will take too much, just as she did. These are not conscious choices, they are compulsions driven by emotional memory. And this memory, because it lives in the unconscious, cannot be healed until it is brought to light. We may think we've forgiven, moved on, grown up, but then something small, a tone of voice, a delay in response, a lack of attention, triggers a wave of disproportionate feeling. Suddenly we are back in the room with her, fighting for attention, proving our worth, bracing for disapproval. And in that moment it is clear the inner child is still holding on to a mother who cannot respond. She is not there anymore, but her echo still rules the house. Healing begins the moment we turn toward that echo and listen with clarity and compassion, not to accuse, not to worship, but to understand. Many people resist this work because they believe facing the inner mother is an act of betrayal. But truth is not betrayal. It is liberation. In the Bible we are said that the truth shall make us free, and that includes the truth about how we were shaped. This truth is not meant to indict, but to illuminate. To see clearly is not to condemn the mother, but to become responsible for our own healing. For the mother, too, was shaped by her mother and her mother before her. The wound is ancestral. The image we carry was not only formed by her hands, but passed through generations of unprocessed pain. And to face that image is to interrupt the cycle, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us. There are moments in life when we are called not to act, but to remember. To sit with the image we've carried all these years and ask, what did I need that I did not receive? What was I told about myself that was not true? What have I believed about love, about trust, about God, because of this first relationship? And in those questions a new space opens, a space where grace can enter. In the Bible we are said that God is near to the brokenhearted, and it is often in facing the mother wound that we encounter that nearness. For God does not bypass the soul's architecture. He meets us within it. He does not demand we forget the past, but invites us to redeem it. When we face the inner mother, we come to face with our most vulnerable self, the one who wanted nothing but to be held without condition, the one who confused performance with love, the one who dimmed her light to stay safe or hardened his heart to stay strong. That part of us still waits, and it will go on waiting until someone listens. Not the outer mother, she may not be able or willing, but we can listen. We can look into the eyes of that wounded child and say, "You are not invisible. I see you now." And in that sacred gaze, something begins to shift. Not all at once, but gradually, the inner mother loses her grip. The voice that whispered unworthiness begins to fade, and in its place, a new voice arises. Not an echo of the past, but the sound of becoming whole. There is a silent inheritance passed down from mother to child, not made of material things or spoken teachings, but woven through the subtle, sacred space of the spirit. This inheritance shapes how we see ourselves, how we interpret the world, and ultimately how we relate to God. The maternal wound is often misunderstood as merely emotional, but its roots are deeper than emotion. It is spiritual. It touches the very essence of the self, the soul's earliest encounter with love and judgment, acceptance and rejection, worth and unworthiness. When a child looks into the eyes of their mother and finds warmth, safety, and attunement. Something within opens to life and to God. But when the eyes they look into are cold, distant, unpredictable, or overwhelmed, something closes, often without words, often without understanding why. This spiritual fracture does not show up in visible ways at first, but it becomes the lens through which all things sacred are interpreted. From infancy, the mother holds the power to introduce the child to a world of meaning. She becomes the first translator of experience, the first interpreter of reality. If she speaks to the child's needs with tenderness, the child learns that the world is responsive. If she ignores or punishes vulnerability, the child learns that need is dangerous. These lessons are not just emotional, they are spiritual. They form the foundation of how a person comes to relate to mystery, to trust, to surrender. If the early experience of love is distorted, then the experience of divine love becomes confusing. God becomes abstract, distant, or demanding, not because he is that way, but because the soul cannot receive him without first passing through the damaged channels of maternal association. In the Bible we are said that perfect love casts out fear, but many live with fear not because they have rejected God, but because the earliest image of love was contaminated by fear. If love was given as a reward, the soul expects divine love to be earned. If love was withheld when the child cried or failed, the soul assumes God withdraws in disappointment. These are not conscious beliefs. They are embodied expectations that shape the entire spiritual life. One may sit in church, sing the songs, pray the prayers, and still feel unworthy, still feel unseen. The voice of the inner mother whispers louder than the voice of God, and until that voice is confronted, the soul remains split between faith and self-rejection. The maternal wound is not always caused by cruelty. Sometimes it is born from emotional absence, from a mother who was physically there, but spiritually gone. Other times, it is born from over-involvement, where the mother's love came with strings, with guilt, with demands for emotional allegiance. In either case, the child learns that love is not simple. It is something to be negotiated, protected, or sacrificed for. These patterns do not dissolve on their own. They grow, evolving into spiritual confusion, relational instability, and inner fragmentation. People try to fix the surface, changing jobs, partners, communities, without realizing the root lies in the earliest relationship. And so healing remains elusive, because the wound is not being named for what it is. To heal the maternal wound, the soul must go inward, not to blame or judge, but to see clearly. It must name the places where its understanding of God has been entangled with a broken version of love. It must notice the moments it recoils from closeness, the moments it cannot trust goodness, the moments it feels like a burden simply for needing. These are not sins, they are symptoms. They are cries from a younger part of the self, still waiting for the kind of love that brings rest. In the Bible, we are said that God comforts his people as a mother comforts her child. This image is not accidental. It speaks to a need that runs deeper than language. A need for the sacred feminine tenderness that the soul was designed to receive from the beginning. When this maternal tenderness is distorted or absent, the spirit suffers. And because the soul seeks completion, it will try to fill the void with anything: achievement, relationships, religious zeal, or self-denial. But none of these can replace the original loss. The soul does not need more effort, it needs to be held. Not physically, but spiritually. It needs to encounter a love that is not earned, not withdrawn, not conditional. A love that says, "You are enough, even now." This is the kind of love only God can offer, but it is difficult to receive it if the spiritual channel is still carrying the static of early wounds. There are those who spend their entire lives serving others while secretly feeling empty, not because they are insincere, but because they are living out a pattern of care-taking that began in childhood. They are trying to earn love by being needed, trying to matter by disappearing. This is not virtue, it is survival, And God did not design the soul to survive indefinitely. He designed it to thrive. In the Bible we are said that God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. But before the healing, there must be recognition. The wound must be seen for what it is. It is not ingratitude to acknowledge the spiritual effects of a painful maternal relationship. It is not dishonor to face what was missing. It is truth, and truth is sacred. The maternal wound hides beneath many masks. Perfectionism, anxiety, chronic guilt, fear of intimacy, distrust of authority. It manifests in the inability to rest, the compulsion to perform, the terror of being alone. These are not personal failures. They are spiritual injuries, and they require spiritual restoration, not through punishment or striving, but through the slow, sacred work of reparenting the soul. This begins by inviting God into the spaces where the mother could not go, by allowing the presence of divine love to replace the absence we have carried for too long, by listening to the parts of us that still grieve and not silencing them out of shame. The soul cannot heal until it feels safe, and safety does not come through denial, but through presence. God is not asking us to pretend the wound is not there. He is asking us to bring it to Him raw and real, to let Him mother us where no one else could, to let Him teach us again what love really is. This is not weakness. It is the beginning of wholeness. It is how the soul comes home to itself. In the quiet place, where no one else sees, God becomes the mother we never had, and the spirit begins to breathe again. There is a shadow many carry within them that they mistake for their own personality, when in truth, it is a mask forged in childhood to earn survival, love, or peace. This mask often forms in the presence of a mother whose approval felt like sunlight one moment and thunder the next. A mother who perhaps never healed from her own wounds, and in her fragility or volatility, demanded that the child become small, silent, compliant, or over-responsible. In this environment, the child does not get to become who they are. They become who they need to be to avoid conflict, to gain a smile, to feel safe. And the most tragic part is that this adaptation is praised. They are told they are mature, easy, good. But underneath, their authentic self remains buried, unseen, unprotected, and untouched. Many adults do not realize they are still living with that adaptation. They go through life making sure others are comfortable, avoiding the expression of their own needs, fears, and desires because, somewhere along the way, they were taught that their truth is too much, too inconvenient, too risky. They were never explicitly told this. Rather, it was the mother's gaze, her sigh, her tension, her withdrawal, or her emotional flooding that spoke louder than words. Over time, the soul internalizes the unspoken rule. If I want love, I cannot be all of myself. And so they fracture, splitting into the person they are and the person they pretend to be. This is not merely psychological, it is deeply spiritual, because the soul, made in the image of God, was never meant to hide. In the Bible, we are said that man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. But how can we come before God with a whole heart if we do not know who we are? How can we receive divine love when the self we bring to the altar is only the acceptable version? Many pray and serve and give with sincerity, but secretly feel numb or restless or unseen by God, not because He is absent, but because they are approaching Him through a false self, one that was built in their mother's presence out of necessity, not truth. The pain they feel in their spirituality is not because they lack faith, but because their faith has been filtered through the lens of self-erasure. A child who has to suppress their truth in order to feel safe begins to believe that love is conditional. This belief becomes a foundational pattern in their adult relationships. They become hyper-aware of other people's moods, walking on eggshells to avoid displeasure. They may apologize for things that are not their fault, anticipate needs before they are spoken, and feel guilt for expressing boundaries. All of this feels normal to them because it is familiar. But what it truly reveals is the cost of having been raised in an environment where emotional safety was not guaranteed. That cost is the exile of the true self. And when that true self has been exiled long enough, it begins to decay beneath layers of performance, anxiety, and perfectionism. The soul grows weary not from doing too much, but from never being real. And in that weariness, there is often a turning point. A moment when the mask no longer works, when the applause no longer satisfies, when the smile feels hollow. This is when the soul begins to hunger for what it has never had the permission to exist, to feel, to speak, to need. But this hunger is terrifying, because to reclaim the true self is to risk losing the very strategies that once protected it. It feels like death, and in a way, it is the death of the false identity, the persona that was constructed in response to the maternal wound. This is the place where healing begins, not in more striving, but in surrender. In the Bible we are said that whoever loses their life will find it. The life that must be lost is not the external one, but the internal falsehood that was never truly ours. The one shaped by fear, by emotional survival, by silence and appeasement. To lose that life is not destruction, it is resurrection. But resurrection can only come after the burial. We must grieve the years we lived as someone else. We must weep for the self we abandoned to gain love that was never safe. We must sit in the discomfort of not knowing who we are without the mask. As this inner work unfolds, we begin to see our mother not with blame, but with clarity. We realize she too likely lived from an adaptation shaped by her own unmet needs and inherited fears. We begin to see that the legacy is not personal. It is generational. And yet this insight does not minimize the wound. It simply allows us to hold both truth and compassion. It allows us to say, "This hurt me," without saying, "You are evil." It allows us to reclaim our truth without severing ourselves from love. In the Bible we are said that God desires truth in the innermost parts. That truth is not always neat. It is raw, layered, and ancient, but it is the path to liberation. One of the greatest spiritual awakenings is the moment a person realizes they no longer have to be who their mother needed them to be. That they are allowed to feel anger, to express sadness, to be messy, to not have all the answers. That they are allowed to be loved in their fullness, not in their edited self. This is the journey back to authenticity, a journey not of rebellion, but of remembrance. For in the core of every soul is a memory of who they were before the adaptation, before the performance. That memory is not lost. It is waiting, buried under years of pleasing, performing, and pretending. To reclaim it is to return to God with nothing hidden. It is to come naked and unashamed, as in the garden before fear entered. It is to stand before the one who sees all and loves all, not the image we project, but the self we buried. And in that gaze, something long dead begins to stir. Not a role, not a script, but a soul. A soul no longer bound to the expectations of a wounded mother, but free to become who it was always meant to be. Not in defiance, but in divine alignment. Not through rebellion, but through restoration. Not by hiding, but by being seen, fully, finally, and forever. There is a deep ache that lives inside many people, though they may not know its name. It is the ache of a soul that was expected to carry what was never theirs to hold. A child cannot distinguish between what is theirs and what belongs to another. They only know the emotional temperature of the room and their instinctive desire to make it better. So when a mother is overwhelmed, emotionally unstable, constantly in need, or subtly leaning on the child for comfort, the child becomes a container for her unprocessed pain. This is not a conscious choice, it is a survival mechanism born from love and fear. The child takes on the sadness, the confusion, the blame, the guilt, and the silent responsibility to keep the mother from falling apart. And in doing so, they lose themselves. Many walk into adulthood carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs. They feel responsible for the happiness of others, guilty when they say no, anxious when they put themselves first. They find themselves trapped in relationships where they are the caretaker, the fixer, the listener, always giving, rarely receiving. And beneath this pattern is the echo of childhood, where love was tied to service, safety was tied to compliance, and self-worth was tied to how well they could manage someone else's chaos. In the Bible we are said to cast our burdens upon the Lord, for He cares for us. But when you've been trained to carry what isn't yours, surrender feels like failure. The soul has been shaped to believe that suffering is the price of love, and exhaustion is the proof of value. When a mother places emotional weight on a child, even unconsciously, she steals something sacred. She robs the child of the right to their own emotions, their own voice, their own sense of self. The child becomes an emotional mirror, reflecting back whatever the mother cannot face in herself. If she is angry, the child becomes appeasing. If she is sad, the child becomes her comfort. If she is anxious, the child becomes her anchor. But who, then, becomes the anchor for the child? Who sees their needs, their fears, their inner world? Often no one. And so the child internalizes the belief that their own needs are unimportant, even dangerous. They silence themselves not because they don't feel, but because they fear that their feelings will break someone they love. This is not just psychological, it is deeply spiritual. The soul was not created to bear the emotional burden of another person's healing. It was not designed to parent the one who was meant to be the parent. And yet many do so every day, without question, because the pattern was set so early it became invisible. Even in their walk with God, they may find themselves performing rather than receiving, doing rather than being, striving to please rather than resting in love. In the Bible we are said that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. But there is no freedom in a soul that is carrying the emotional legacy of a wounded mother. The journey of healing begins with naming what was once unspeakable. Not to condemn, but to become conscious. To say, I was made to feel responsible for things I could not control. To say, I became my mother's emotional caretaker. To say, my own feelings were pushed aside so I could manage someone else's. These statements do not dishonor the mother. They honor the truth. And truth is what sets the soul free. Without it, we live in a false story, one where we are always the giver, the forgiver, the absorber, and never the one who is held. That is not divine design. That is a distortion born of brokenness. When the soul begins to untangle from this inherited burden, it may feel lost. Who am I if I am not fixing someone else? Who am I if I am not earning love through sacrifice? The questions are disorienting because the identity has been built around emotional service. But this disorientation is holy. It is the unraveling of a false self, the undoing of a yoke that was never blessed by God. In the Bible we are said that His yoke is easy and His burden is light. So if the burden you carry is crushing, it is not from Him. It is time to lay it down. But laying it down does not happen in one moment. It is a process, a spiritual unlearning. It involves returning to situations where you once silenced yourself and allowing your voice to rise. It means setting boundaries with those who expect you to always say yes. It means learning to feel your own feelings without guilt, to rest without shame, to receive without fear. These are not selfish acts. They are acts of sacred reparation. You are not betraying anyone by healing. You are returning to the design of God, who never asked a child to carry what only he can hold. Sometimes, the emotional burden is wrapped in silence. The mother never said, "You are responsible for me," but she said it in the way her voice trembled, in the way her tears fell, in the way her disappointment felt like punishment. Other times, it was overt. She called the child her best friend, told them things they were too young to carry, leaned on them when she should have leaned on God. Either way, the result is the same. The child's soul becomes split, carrying their own growing needs, while cradling the wounds of another. This leaves no room for rest, for play, for authenticity. It creates adults who are weary, confused, and unable to feel safe unless someone else is okay. A God is not asking us to abandon compassion, but He is inviting us to discern. There is a holy difference between love and enmeshment, between helping and rescuing, between compassion and codependence. Love bears one another's burdens, yes, but it does not absorb another's identity. It does not erase the self. It does not replace God. And many who were emotionally burdened by their mothers find themselves unconsciously doing the same to others, trying to be everything to everyone, never realizing that they are reenacting the same dynamic that once wounded them. To heal is to stop the cycle. To say, I no longer carry what is not mine. To say, I am worthy of space, of voice, of rest. To say, I release my mother's pain back to her and to God. This is not abandonment. It is liberation. It is a return to the self that existed before the weight, before the guilt, before the invisible role was assigned. It is the quiet, brave decision to no longer prove your love through suffering. It is the beginning of a new legacy where love is mutual, where burdens are shared, and where the soul is finally allowed to breathe. There is a hidden grief in many hearts, one that does not rise in the usual places of mourning, but lingers quietly in the soul like a forgotten room full of unshed tears. This grief is not about what was lost, but about what was never given. It is the grief of a child who waited for warmth that never arrived, who longed to be seen with tenderness and felt instead the chill of emotional absence. It is the sorrow of growing up with a mother who was physically present but emotionally distant, cold, critical, or preoccupied. This absence is not always obvious, it is not loud. It is a silence, a lack, an emptiness in the space where love was supposed to be. And because it is hard to name, many never realize that they are grieving. This kind of wound is disorienting because it hides beneath the surface of functioning. You may have had food, clothes, and shelter. You may have never been yelled or hit. And yet, something vital was missing. The soft place to land, the gentle eyes that delighted in your existence, the nurturing presence that mirrored your feelings back to you and said, I see you, and you are good. Without these things, the child does not learn that they are lovable simply for being. Instead, they learn that they must earn attention, perform for approval, or suppress their needs altogether, and the soul in its innocence internalizes the absence as evidence of unworthiness. Many adults still carry this invisible wound. They are kind, successful, generous, and thoughtful, and yet, deep inside, they feel empty. Not because they are broken, but because they are still waiting for something they never received. They don't know why certain compliments don't land, why love feels unfamiliar, why they shrink when someone truly sees them. It's not that they lack confidence, it's their emotional foundation was built on absence. And absence does not teach the heart how to receive. In the Bible we are said that love is patient and kind, not cold or indifferent. But when your first model of love was emotionally distant, your soul becomes fluent in absence and illiterate in affection. This grief is complicated by the fact that many feel guilty for having it. They think, my mother did her best, she didn't hurt me, she provided for me. And yes, she may have, but the human heart needs more than provision. It needs presence. It needs warmth and connection. It needs to be cherished. To acknowledge that you didn't receive things is not a betrayal. It is truth. And in the Bible we are said that the truth sets us free. But truth can only liberate us when we allow it to rise, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it disrupts the stories we have told ourselves. Grieving a mother who was emotionally absent is particularly painful because it lacks clarity. You can't point to a specific wound or event. Instead, it's a series of subtle moments that never happened. 1,000 invisible cuts where there should have been care. And so the grief feels vague, like reaching for something in the dark that you're not sure was ever really there. but it was supposed to be. That's what makes the sorrow so sacred. You're not grieving fantasy. You're grieving the divine design of how things were meant to be. A mother's love was supposed to reflect the unconditional love of God, who never withholds, who never turns away, who draws near to the brokenhearted. When that reflection is missing, the soul is left searching for its own image in a mirror that never existed. In the absence of emotional warmth, many children become hyper-independent. They learn not to cry, not to ask, not to expect. They take pride in being low maintenance, in never needing help. But this is not strength. It is armor that was forged too early and worn for too long. The child who learned not to need becomes the adult who doesn't know how to receive. And yet, the soul never stops longing. It just hides the longing behind competence, behind politeness, behind perfection. But in the quiet moments, the ache returns, the silent plague. Will anyone ever truly care for me? Not for what I do, but for who I am. This is the invitation of healing. Not to change the past, but to name what was missing, to mourn what you never received, and to allow God to fill the void with a love that is not conditional or cold. In the Bible we are said that God will comfort those who mourn. Not just those who lost someone, but those who never had someone in the way they needed. Those who mourn the absence of laughter, of touch, of presence, of joy. Those who look back at childhood and see a smile that never reached the eyes. God meets us in that grief, not with judgment, but with compassion, because He knows what it is to be unseen, to be rejected, to be misunderstood. And He knows how to restore the years the locusts have eaten, even the years marked by quiet hunger and unspoken longing. Healing does not mean you stop longing. It means you stop pretending that you never did. It means you make room for the H and allow it to be held, not by the one who could not give you what you needed, but by the one who can. It means you stop shaming yourself for the void inside you and start tending to it with grace. You stop expecting your mother to suddenly become emotionally available, and you grieve the fact that she may never be. You stop minimizing your pain just because it wasn't loud. Emotional absence is real, and its impact is profound. Many who walk with this wound struggle to believe that they are truly lovable. They think they must work harder, look better, do more. But in the Bible we are said that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, knit together with intention and love. That truth was never revoked, even if your mother could not see it, even if she never affirmed you, even if she never looked at you with wonder in her eyes. God did. God does. And that gaze can begin to heal the gaze that was missing. But only if you allow yourself to admit that you wanted it, that you waited for it, that a part of you still hopes for it. This is not weakness. It is holy vulnerability. It is the beginning of becoming whole. Because we do not heal by erasing the need. We heal by letting the need be met at last, in a way that is eternal, not dependent on those who could not give what they never had themselves. You can mourn the absence and still live in abundance. You can grieve what was missing and still become who you were meant to be. You can carry the scar without carrying the shame. And in that sacred morning, something opens. A place where the light of divine love enters, a place where the soul, once unseen, finally begins to be known. There comes a point in the journey of the soul when silence is no longer healing, when repression is no longer peace, and when the absence of conflict is no longer enough to call something love. We walk through years, sometimes decades, constructing walls around our hearts with bricks of rationalization, denial, and quiet suffering, because the first wound came from someone we were told to honor, someone we were meant to trust. But when the one who birthed you, or raised you, or looked into your eyes and did not see you, when that person becomes the origin of your shame, your confusion, your endless search for worth, you are faced with a truth that will not let go. You will never heal until you face this about your mother. To speak of the mother is to touch the archetype of life itself. She is the first mirror, the first voice, the first taste of comfort or the first taste of fear. Her presence becomes the language through which we learn to read the world. If she is nurturing, we assume the world is safe. If she is harsh, we prepare ourselves for war. If she is unpredictable, we live in constant hypervigilance. She is not just a person, she is a symbol. And to confront what she did or did not give you is to confront the shape of your very soul. The refusal to face this keeps us bound in cycles we do not understand. We run toward achievement only to feel hollow. We run toward relationships only to recreate the very same neglect. We serve, sacrifice, strive, but never rest. We pray but feel distant from God because the template we were handed for love was laced with fear. And in Bible we are said that perfect love casts out fear, which means any love that trains you to abandon yourself is not love at all. Many were taught that to question your mother is rebellion, that to name her failure is dishonor. But there is no freedom in such false loyalty. To honor does not mean to lie. To forgive does not mean to pretend. And to love someone does not require you to protect them from the truth. There are mothers who were wounded children themselves. Mothers who did not know how to hold what was fragile in you because no one ever held what was fragile in them. But understanding her pain does not erase yours. It is possible to hold compassion in one hand and accountability in the other. The soul does not heal through blame, but neither does it heal through silence. In Bible we are said that there is a time to keep silent and a time to speak. This is the time to speak, not with accusation, but with awakening. There are many who walk with a limp they cannot name, the emotional residue of a mother's absence, coldness, control, comparison, or collapse. Some were smothered, some were shamed, some were ignored, some were made to grow up too fast, and all were shaped by what was not healed in her. This legacy lives on in how you speak to yourself, how you receive love, how you say yes when you mean no, how you parent your own children, how you trust or mistrust others, how you interpret the silence of God. Healing begins when we trace the thread of dysfunction back to its origin, when we stop treating symptoms and start naming roots. You cannot pray away what you are too afraid to feel. You cannot cast out what you have not first acknowledged. There are those who spend years in spiritual service, pouring out, giving, fasting, leading, and yet inwardly feel dry, disconnected, confused. And often, this is not a sign of rebellion, but a sign of repression. The soul that to be the adult in childhood often becomes the performer in adulthood. You do not know how to receive because your earliest lessons taught you that love is earned through invisibility, that attention comes through utility. But in Bible we are said that we are chosen not by works, but by grace, not by effort, but by the delight of the Creator. The inner child that once held back tears to avoid upsetting a fragile mother is the same adult who now cannot cry in the presence of God. The wall you built to protect yourself is the same wall that keeps love out. There are mothers who said the right things but lived the wrong way. There are mothers who spoke of God but did not embody His presence. There are mothers who prayed publicly but punished privately. There are mothers who never raised a hand but always raised their expectations so high they crushed your soul beneath them. There are mothers who smiled in family photos but weaponized guilt behind closed doors. And then there are the subtle forms of abandonment, the emotional vacancy, the blank stares, the absence of attunement, the disinterest in your inner world. These wounds do not bleed, but they scar. These wounds do not scream, but they silence. And healing begins not with confrontation of her, but with confrontation of yourself. To face this is to grieve. Not only what was done, but what was never done. Not only what was said, but what was never said. Not only what you endured, but what you missed. The birthdays that felt hollow. The hugs that never came. The pride she never expressed. The moments when you needed her to see your soul, and she was too distracted by her own. This grief is sacred. It is not a detour from the spiritual path. It is the path. In Bible we are said that those who mourn shall be comforted, not those who numb, not those who pretend, but those who mourn. Many spend their whole lives trying to earn from others what their mother never gave, chasing approval, begging for validation, repeating the same dynamic in friendships, in marriage, in mentorship, until one day they awaken and realize that the well they've been drawing from is dry. You cannot rewrite the past by reenacting it with new characters. You cannot heal a maternal wound by becoming a maternal figure to everyone else. You cannot find wholeness through substitution. Healing requires returning to the original loss, sitting in the discomfort, and inviting the presence of God into that very space. The place where your soul learned to fragment is the place where God desires to restore. In Bible, we are said that He is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. This is not metaphor. It is medicine. To face the truth about your mother is to reclaim the authority of your own voice. It is to say, I am no longer a child in need of her permission to feel. It is to dethrone the false idol of perfection you've placed over her and to see her as she truly was. Limited, human, and perhaps unequipped. It is to forgive not because she deserves it, but because you do. Because you deserve to walk unchained. Because you deserve a life that is not a reaction to hers. Because you deserve a love that is not poisoned by fear, guilt, or unresolved need. Forgiveness is not a forgetting. It is a remembering that no longer controls you. It is a surrender of vengeance, not a surrender of truth. In Bible we are said to be transformed by the renewing of the mind. But your mind cannot be renewed by lies. You will know that you are healing when you stop defending her and start tending to yourself. You will know you are healing when you stop explaining away your pain and start exploring it. You will know you are healing when you stop recreating her withers and start reclaiming the innocence that was taken from you. Healing is not linear and it is not easy, but it is holy. It is the slow unraveling of generational patterns. It is the quiet dismantling of emotional scaffolding. It is the soft return of your true voice, the one that was silenced beneath her unmet expectations, her emotional volatility, or her emotional vacancy. It takes courage to speak the truth that has lived in your bones for decades. It takes courage to admit that you were hurt by the one who was supposed to protect you. It takes courage to stop waiting for an apology that may never come. But in that courage there is resurrection. In that courage there is a second birth. In that courage, the motherhood no longer defines you. It refines you. It becomes not a prison, but a portal. A way through, not a way back, because God does not waste pain. He does not ignore generational bondage. He is the God of restoration, of recompense, of rebirth. In Bible we are said that He will give us beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. To face this about your mother is not to stay in the wound, but to walk through it, to name what was real, to feel what was repressed, to release what was never yours, and to receive what only God can give. You are not weak for feeling. You are not dishonorable for naming. You are not disloyal for healing. You are becoming. You are unbecoming the false self and becoming the one you were created to be. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are not alone. The wood may have begun with your mother, but the healing begins with you. And in the space where she failed, God is faithful. It is not your job to fix her. It is not your job to understand her. It is your job to understand yourself, to repair what was broken in you, to rewrite the narrative that says love is pain, or presence is unpredictable, or that your worth depends on your silence. You are allowed to rewrite the story. You are allowed to choose peace over performance, truth over tradition, wholeness over habit. In Bible we are said that whom the Son sets free is free indeed, and that freedom includes freedom from the unspoken rules, the inherited shame, the emotional legacies that were never yours to carry. You are not here to become your mother. You are here to become yourself. You are not here to repeat what was done. You are here to be the interruption. You are not here to fix the past. You are here to heal in the present. This is the sacred work. This is the holy call. This is the deeper truth. And in this truth, there is life. Not a life bound by the past, but a life finally lived. A life not built on repression, but on revelation. A life not lived in fear, but filled with the love that never fails.